The lives of high-ranking Nazi officials' wives after the war have frequently been disregarded, despite the horrors they committed during World War II being well known and documented. Upon the end of the war, what became of these women who were married to some of the most infamous people in history? Were they forced to bear the consequences of their husband's behavior, or could they have a tranquil life? Ilsa Hess. Adolf Hitler's deputy, Rudolf Hess, and Ilsa Hess's unshakable devotion to the Nazi Party defined her life. She developed into Rudolf Hess's loyal friend, supporting him during the tumultuous Third Reich years. Early in the 1920s, Ilsa and Rudolf Hess met. Their romance flourished as National Socialism gained traction. She first joined the Nazi Party in 1921 and later returned when the organization was outlawed in 1925. Rudolf Hess first piqued her interest, but he was hesitant to pursue a relationship. Adolf Hitler often participated in social gatherings organized by wealthy women, which Ilsa introduced to Hess. The marriage of Ilsa and Hess took place in Munich on December 20, 1927, and Hitler had a major influence on its facilitation. Furthermore, Hitler served as the godfather of Wolf Hess, their lone child, who was born in 1937. Ilsa was a staunch supporter of the Nazi regime throughout the war. When her husband took off on a lone trip to Scotland in an attempt to broker a peace deal with the United Kingdom, her allegiance became very clear. Ilsa steadfastly maintained his aims and stayed by the party in spite of the consequences of his misguided quest. After the war, Ilsa Hess's life was characterized by the difficulties of reconstruction and adjusting to an irreversibly altered environment. During the Nuremberg trials, her husband was sentenced to life in jail, leaving her to raise their son by herself. Ilsa Hess was detained following World War II along with a few other wives of high-ranking Nazis who were either executed or found guilty in the Nuremberg trials. They sent her to an Augsburg internment camp. After being released, she relocated to Aargau, and by 1955 had set up a boarding house. Till her death, Ilsa Hess was a staunch supporter of Adolf Hitler and his ideas as a National Socialism advocate. She supported Still Hilfe, a post-war organization that offered assistance to SS members who were detained, found guilty, and on the run. Her controversial book, Spandau Nürnberg England, Ein Schnipsel in Briefen, which was released in 1952, attracted some interest. Her correspondence included well-known Hitler supporters. Throughout her final years, she fought to have her husband released from Spandau prison, where he was detained until his passing in 1987. On September 7, 1995, Ilsa Hess passed away. She left behind a complicated legacy entwined with Nazi Germany's turbulent past. Marguerite Himler. Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsfuhrer SS, was married to Marguerite Himler. Ironically, Marguerite Himmler's original training was in nursing, with the admirable goal of saving lives during World War I. She moved to the German Red Cross hospital after the war and even maintained a private nursing clinic with her father's financial assistance. In 1927, Marguerite happened to meet Heinrich while he was on one of his lecture trips. He was instantly drawn to her because of her blonde hair and blue eyes. Because of their age gap, her prior marriage, and her Protestant faith, Heinrich was first hesitant to introduce Marguerite to his Catholic family. Nevertheless, in July of the following year, they were married. Marguerite was eventually reluctantly embraced by his family. On August 8, 1929, the couple welcomed their daughter, Gudrun, into the world. Marguerite was by no means a bystander to her husband's actions. In 1928, she joined the Nazi Party and organized frequent get-togethers for the wives of senior SS officials. She was very unpopular, even though she was involved. She disagreed with the other ladies at the 1938 Nuremberg rally, and they all refused to follow her example. Marguerite was in charge of the Red Cross hospitals in Berlin-Brandenburg by the end of 1939. Her job required her to go on missions to areas and nations occupied by the German Wehrmacht. Her diary has a record of a journey she took in March 1940 to Poland, which was occupied by the Germans at the time, supporting her eyewitness account of what happened there. "Then I was in Posen, Los, and Warsaw," wrote Marguerite. "The dirt is unfathomable, and the majority of this Jewish rabble, the Polacks, don't appear like human beings. The task of establishing order there is truly amazing." Himmler's efforts led to her being promoted to colonel in the German Red Cross. Marguerite Himler wrote a letter to her brother, Gebhard Himmler, in February 1945, sharing her feelings about Heinrich. How wonderful it is that he is equal to the tremendous tasks to which he has been called. All of Germany is observing him. Heinrich Himmler spent one last moment with Marguerite in April 1945 before he passed away. Years prior, their marriage had all but ended when Marguerite learned in 1941 that Heinrich had been having extramarital affairs with his secretary, with whom he had 2 children. A number of inquiries into Margaret's knowledge of her husband's extramarital activities were conducted. She begged to be exonerated of any knowledge of her husband's transgressions and to be freed from any relationship with the Nazi Party. Following much consideration, in 1953 she was found to be a Nazi regime profiteer and given a 30-day prison sentence. She lost her ability to vote and quality for a pension as well. Lina Heinrich. Hans, Lina's brother, was a devoted SA and Nazi Party member. His enthusiastic endorsement of the party brought Lina to a 1929 rally, when Adolf Hitler gave a speech that profoundly affected her and inspired her to join the Nazi Party. When she was 19, she met Naval Lieutenant Heinrich at a rowing club ball in Kiel, which ultimately led to the news of their engagement on December 18, 1930. But the next year, Heinrich was charged with conduct unbecoming to an officer and gentleman, after breaking a vow to marry a woman he had been seeing for 6 months before he proposed to Lina. As a result, he was fired from the Navy in April and lost his job. Lina was the one who brought up the idea of a job in the recently formed SS. Heinrich's plans for an SS intelligence service led Heinrich Himmler to name him head of the newly established intelligence service, later called the SD, right away. Given her husband's commitment to the Nazi cause, Hitler gave Lina a sizable estate in rural Bohemia as a present. She is accused of violently abusing the captives she kept on the plantation for forced labor. The family stayed there until April 1945, when they fled the retreating Soviet Red Army with many other Germans. Lina was exonerated in the denazification process following World War II. She was able to obtain a pension after a series of legal battles against the West German government in 1956 and 1959. This was a difficult decision considering her husband's major involvement in the Holocaust. She was found guilty and given a life sentence in absentia by Czechoslovakia, but she was able to evade serving her time. While on vacation in Finland in 1965, she fell in love with Mauno Manninen, a Finnish theater director, with the primary goal of changing her last name. Before an accident started a fire, she oversaw the renovation of her first husband, Reinhard Heydrich, into a restaurant and inn on Fehmarn. Her book, Life with a War Criminal, was published in 1976. She devoted her life to preserving her first husband's honor until her death on August 14, 1985, at the age of 74. Emmy Goring. On April 10, 1935, Emmy Goring wed the well-known Luftwaffe commander and Nazi Hermann Göring. It's interesting to note that Emmy received Nazi Party induction as a Christmas gift in 1938, despite never having actively sought membership. Emmy Goring was in charge of serving as Hitler's mistress at a number of official events before the outbreak of World War II. The First Lady of the Third Reich, Emmy openly ignored and retreated with contempt Eva Braun, Hitler's intended wife, as a result of her self-proclaimed position. Because of this behavior, Hitler insisted that Hermann Göring give Emmy instructions on how to approach Eva with respect. Emmy's contemptuous behavior resulted in her being barred from Hitler's getaway, the Berghof, in Bavaria. According to reports, Emmy harbored resentment towards Eva Braun because she thought Emmy was the First Lady of the Reich. Emmy lived a luxury lifestyle during World War II since she was in a position of great influence and riches in Europe. The luxury of her husband's possessions, which included homes, farms, and castles in Austria, Germany, and Poland, was evident due to the Nazi regime's plunder of art and money from Jews and other groups deemed enemies. When their daughter Edda was born, her husband ordered 500 planes to fly over Berlin as a sign of respect, saying he would have ordered twice as many if the baby had been a male. Following the war, Emmy was imprisoned for a year after being found guilty of being a Nazi by a German denazification court. Following her release, 30% of her fortune was confiscated, and she was barred from the stage for 5 years. Emmy Goring was able to secure a small flat for herself in Munich following her release from prison. In addition, she penned an autobiography titled My Life with Goring. Emmy died on June 8, 1973 in Munich. She was 80 years old.